All right, welcome back to Course Hacks for Higher Ed. I'm Janelle Corrett. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Rhode Island, and we have with us today Associate Professor Brian Dewsbury, Biological Sciences at the University of Rhode Island, and Assistant Dean Fonts, Dean of Diversity, Recruitment, and Retention. Thank you both so much for being here today. Our topic for today is research, undergrad research. Why should you do it? What's it for? How do you get these opportunities? It's a whole hive of things to talk about with research. And I want to start off by saying, I think, especially for students that are in STEM fields, research is such an important and pivotal experience to get because it gives you all of these additional skills that you need to really thrive in higher ed. So a lot of independence and learning how to problem solve, going into more depth and managing projects, all the skills that are really help you in your courses are the skills that you hone and develop when you're doing research. And you also get a chance to develop these strong relationships with grad students and postdocs and faculty, and they end up, being relationships you carry on throughout college and after. So I'm a huge advocate for any undergrad in any major finding some way to do a research experience. So I want to pass it over to Brian now. What do you think? What advice do you give to students that maybe don't know that much about research, but are thinking about it?
Right. Well, I'm going to do something. You'll get mad at me, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to ask you, because you're a research scientist.
Didn't I already tell you I'm having a rough day? Come on.
Yeah, I know you did tell me, but I don't listen. So I want you to actually look back on your path and tell the audience when you got involved in research. Like, what was the moment where you kind of set yourself, oh, this is the career I would like to pursue, and how did that journey begin?
For me, it started in a course. It was a lab part of the course of animal behavior. Mm-hmm. And we were doing experiments, and we got to design our own experiments in that class. Mm-hmm. And that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, people do this for their jobs. This is so fun. This is something I could do. And then I was taking a different class, and I guess I was just like very engaged in that class. It was with the person who became my advisor, and they invited me to join their lab. And that was amazing. It's Jean Altman at Princeton. She was excellent. She sent me to Kenya to study baboons. And it was just like transformational for me. So, right. I think that, as I reflect back, I didn't pursue research knowing that was what I wanted to do. I had no idea it even existed. Mm-hmm. So it was very much a process of realizing what it was through these experiences with my courses and with, mentors that were really actively seeking out someone for their lab. So that's, I know, kind of a rare experience because it's more, I think, the norm that you would have to go out proactively and find your own research experience.
Well, I mean, that's what we want to happen, right? This is probably why we're having this episode, because I think what you described is, in fact, I mean, I don't have data on this, but it's actually, I think is in fact a lot of what has happened in the past. So my path was similar. I was aiming for a career in conservation science, whatever that meant. I was fully cognizant that I didn't quite know specifically what you would do with that. So in the summer, I would basically sample different kinds of internships, right? I worked with a consulting company. I actually did animal behavior research with fish. And it was when I did some marine research at the Smithsonian one of my summer mentors was saying, well, if you really want to help conservation science, you need to understand how the environment works ecologically. So it made sense to go to grad school for that, right? And I think what the common thread in your story and mine, at least one takeaway I get from it, is that the experiences that then ended up inspiring us to pursue our careers came a bit outside of the conventional curriculum, right? Now I know that's starting to change now, but you may be a STEM major, you may not run into a class or a program that is explicit to you that research and research careers are a viable option. The other piece to it which was so good to hear about that animal behavior lab you were in, is I don't think we've done enough to demonstrate to STEM students that we do science, right? We don't just go to class and talk about it and reiterate a textbook. We do science. Science is a thing that is done, as an active process. And lab is part of that, but sometimes lab, because of the time and the restrictions, you don't get to see all of the mess that's associated with that process. So as a course hack, I guess I first want to underscore the importance of having an authentic research experience, regardless of what you choose to go on to be, because I firmly believe that the best way for you to appreciate and understand how science works, right? We do our best in class, but it's little substitute for that going into the field, going to the lab, making mistakes, asking a question, getting some context for it. That is its own kind of sequence of things to do. Um, the second thing, and this Michelle, knows this firsthand, is typically problematic among students who perhaps are first generation or who have kind of particular ideas of how college should be structured, that they don't seek out these opportunities until junior year, late sophomore year. Okay, I'm happy that you get something even if it's then, but to me by then it's a little late in the game, right? You could have had so much more experience earlier. And I hear messages that, quite frankly, I don't know where it comes from, right? I hear students tell me things like, "Oh, I heard you're not supposed to ask a professor what they do until you're late sophomore." I was like, "Where are you getting?"
Yeah, I heard someone told me that they wanted to do research, but they heard they shouldn't do more than one semester. I was like,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. I'm not in listservs. I don't in emails. So I take it as a responsibility as a first year student professor to bring to incorporate into my class curriculum explicit conversation about applying for summer research programs, right? And so Michelle, and please comment on this, Michelle. We have a lot of institutional um, support for this. Right now, it's being COVID impacted, but there are a lot of summer research programs, federal programs, and their deadlines tend to begin in December, early January, and they now pay a good chunk of change, right? They typically can pay enough to replace, say, that hourly job at Home Depot or something like that. $5,000-$6,000. Many of them are full room and board, so you actually don't have to pay out of pocket even for the flight there. Um, but you have to, and maybe one thing now in the, if it's possible in the chat box after this program, is include the link to the NSF website that lists all of those summer research internships by location. I'll say one more thing, and I'll ask Michelle for a comment, and that is, and this actually ties back, I think, to an earlier episode about talking to your professor early, and I think we had talked about it in the context of getting feedback early, right? Another reason why I think you want to have a conversation is to have this conversation, right? It is perfectly okay to ask, assuming that your professor does research, what they do, or even if they don't, express some interest in this is something that you want to at least see what it's about. And they can give you a way to say scour the websites of their colleagues and have you go on your own rabbit hole chase and see what you like, come back and have another conversation. Oh, these three professors are doing some really awesome stuff. Do you know if they take volunteers, and do I have to have any preparation? Seriously, it's conversations going and it's going, right? Michelle,
right.
have you had those kinds of conversations before?
Absolutely. But I want to backtrack a little bit because I think it's important to kind of give context about me and how it's evolved for me as well. Because I have my education is in adult ed, was my master's program in communications, right? So I didn't know until I got this particular job about the importance of research for students, right? So I just wanted to preface that I didn't have an experience like the two of you did, right? So I didn't know until I started to learn students in the process in cells, right? So there's a few things that I thought about while you were both talking. One is that students are coming with messaging that we can't control. But what we can do is do a better job of right in the beginning to do some things differently than what we do. I'm bringing that up because this is something that's new to both of you as well. one of the things that we're trying to do is because we realize from the experiences that we have with students, they've either gotten bad messages or no messages around research, right? There's very far and few that are like, I know exactly what my trajectory is. I'm going to take this. It just doesn't happen a lot, especially for our diverse students. So one of the things that I'm actually working with Dr. Schwartz on is the actual website, a web page that really just says this is for students, prospective and current new students, to see what we do as far as research, because nowhere on the CELS website or anywhere does it show students that they can start getting in the mix of research from the beginning.
Yeah,
Right?
just to interrupt you real quick, because currently what they would have to do is go to each faculty member's name and then like
Yeah,
meticulous.
they got to search and search and search, right? So we want to make that better. So I want you to know that that is our goal, is by early spring to have all the content ready. It'll be a piece that's part of the CELS website in the future. But as of now, as long as we get the approvals that we're supposed to, just have a one place stop shop that people can just go and see what research is happening in CELS. Let's start there. And it'll be targeted for prospective students. We already talked about that. Like those that already put their deposits down, let's get them a web page, right? So I just want you to know that's in the works, because you're right. Students hear different things and we can't bank on them already being all set. Oh, yep, first step is that. No, we can't do that, right? So that's number one. Number two, we have students that don't have confidence to even go talk to a professor, let alone ask for research. So that is a real issue. So what I'm envisioning us moving forward is in our, I can't say all 101s, but URI 101, it's called the first year student experience now, I believe. By next fall, we have that website all together. And there is an actual session that is built into our CELS URI that, URI 101, that we're going to talk about this. You do not have to have experience. You do not have to have had 4 classes in these particular things to get in the lab and start learning. You don't. And a lot of them have been told that you need to have 3 to 4 classes under your belt. You need to have done X, Y, and Z, which is not true. There are professors that will take a freshman. They actually prefer because they can start them from scratch. So I think our responsibility is to do that work. I know that we are doing this for students, so now I'm going to just switch to that really quick, right? Students, when you are looking for research right now, you may not have a one-stop shop yet, right? But what you can do is go to the CELS website. We don't use it for much, but I will tell you, when you go on that website and you're able to go to each major and see pictures of professors and then click on their link and see what they do, if something sparks you, send them an email and say, I want to meet with you. I'm excited about your research. And talk with them. They may not even have a space in a lab for you, but you're having a conversation. Now they know you're interested. So if they have a space, they know you're there. Or if they know another professor that you can help, that's how you can start the link, right? So making sure you're thoughtful about how you email a professor. Make sure you say, Dr. Dewsbury, I am very interested in your research, and mention some of the things that you read about. And talk a little bit about it and say, I'd like to set up a time to meet you virtually. Start it there, because there's a lot of professors, I'm not going to say all, but there's a lot of professors that are doing research that welcome getting that email and say, oh, a student's interested in my stuff. That's pretty dope. All right, I can meet you at such and then you have a conversation about, I'm new, I'm not sure how to do this, but I know I need the experience. And you'd be surprised at the linkage that you get. And a lot of times it turns into an opportunity, whether it's volunteer, whether it's credit, whether it's paid. So that's how the conversations when I have with students, whether it's a freshman or a junior that's coming in that got bad messaging, let's start looking at what you're interested in. Look at your major page. Look at the people that are doing things. So that would be my first line, right? And then as far as programs are concerned, don't be afraid, apply. Don't be afraid and apply. Worst case scenario is you don't get it that time. Start looking at the application process and do your best and submit, because the worst case scenario is it's a no when you get feedback as to why, and you can make it better for the next time. So now I'll be quiet.
I think that's all great advice. I would add, Michelle, that don't give up. So first of all, faculty are busy, notoriously bad at answering emails. And so if you don't hear back, write again, in a respectful kind of time frame, but follow up. And if they say, well, come, touch base with me next January, then come back and touch base next January. And that kind of persistence, I think, is rewarded. And then also, I would say students are rewarded when they are prepared. So writing and saying, hi, I'm interested in research, goodbye, is really not going to convince many faculty.
I would like to science in your lab.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, especially, they're especially considering all the like barriers and biases that exist. You just want to bring your most like prepared self. So if you come and say, I mean, I've actually not had a student yet do this, but it would be like an automatic in if they're like, I looked at your website, I read your paper, I love this idea, and I would love to do a project on X. I'll be like, wow, look at this student. They know exactly what they want to do.
And that's
It's actually,
not
no, you could do
hard.
all of that in like maybe an hour and a half.
Not even now. If you're interested, think about it. If you're interested
maybe
in
30
getting
minutes.
research, I could definitely go on to your Dr. Correct. You see your picture, you click on your link, you see someone, and there's a description. I don't even think it takes that long. And that's why
Right.
they need to be messaged well around this. No one's talking to students about how
Exactly.
you conduct this process.
I think they just don't know. And even if, I mean, I can't speak for all labs, all PIs, but even if I wasn't working on that project anymore or whatever, just seeing that level of commitment in the first go round of like, I'm really interested in this. I mean, that would just spark the idea, well, this is someone I'm going to keep in mind because they're willing to do some of the work. And especially in this context of a lot of virtual meetings and managing research remotely,
Right.
Which many faculty already did before. But, for me, this was new. I need that kind of level of independence when I bring people in, that I know that they're able to work on their own, more so than before when we were all in person. We would meet and yes,
Right.
look at mosquito larvae in a tray.
Can I add 2 quick points? One point we didn't mention, but I think is really important that we do, is that many STEM students would also have to take some amount of labs as a requirement of their degree. Many of those labs are taught by grad students, right, as part of their expectation of the TA-ship. And those grad students are grad students in research labs. So, even if you don't go the reach out to a professor route, sometimes you might cultivate a relationship with the grad student who's your TA. That's a perfect opportunity to talk to them about their research and their path and their process and their lab and what's interesting in it. And they might be more accessible in terms of responsiveness than a professor. So, right, that to me is a golden space
Yes.
to have that conversation.
I actually think you're right that I think grad students in some ways are better mentors because they will give you more time.
Right.
They'll work with you a lot more. I'm not saying it's such a generalization, but some of the best, mentors that I had, it wasn't just the PI, it was also the postdoc or the grad student as well.
Yeah.
The second thing I would mention is, it's a process, and you don't expect to kind of go into the lab and win a Nobel Prize a week after, right? Obviously, given the journey that we all have, Nell and I in particular have been on, it takes a while to learn how to do this stuff right, come up with good ideas, make it credible, gain acceptance in the community, which is his own kind of worms. But when I was an undergrad, I got fired from the lab I worked for, right? And I would have fired me too, right? I wasn't in a good, mature place. I wasn't accountable. In fact, the person who fired me became one of my, and still is one of my best mentors. And I think I needed that being asked to leave and do something else to kind of wake me up and start taking my love of science a bit more seriously, right? So
that's another course hack, Brian.
Huh?
That's another course hack. You just thought, we're going to talk about that another time.
But I guess I want to make sure people don't hear me saying it's okay to get fired, but the message I'm trying to share is that go in there and kind of expect to have some growing pains, but be prepared to learn from that, right? And not see the first barrier or the first stumble as a sign of anything predictive about who you are as a scientist. So
Yeah,
I
there's
wish you luck. I think
definitely,
it'll be a lot of fun.
you need to redefine what you consider a failure, because the actual research is a process of not succeeding until you do. And it's just, you have to keep working it and trying different things until you get to that point where the experiment actually runs the way that it was designed to run. And then you still may not get the result you expected, and that's okay.
And can I just add one other thing? By the way, you might not like it. Ooh.
Right.
Just want to add.
Sacrilege, Michelle,
However,
sacrilege.
I
Yes,
know, right?
you love it.
But you still learn how to be in a lab, right? You may be doing data collection and it's driving you insane. You got to put the measurements of every shark fin that you've ever seen, and it's driving you crazy. But you still know how to be in a lab. You've learned.
So I'm gonna stop you there, Michelle, because I spent 2.5 years sifting baboon shit. That was literally my job.
That's fun.
But I loved it. No, I didn't love the actual feces, but it's not about the sample. It's not about the numbering. It's about the bigger picture. And so I think you can get that with anything. So
But sorry to interrupt, but just to make sure this point real quick, I think what you're saying is still consistent with each other. What I've seen based on what Michelle's point, and I've seen it with students, is look, you're going to lab A and it's perfectly fine stuff, but it's just not for me. It's not, not really speaking to me in the same way as lab B. And I think, Michelle, I'm not mansplaining here, but I think what you're saying is like, look, if it just doesn't jive with you, it doesn't mean all of science and all of research is now a locked door. Be prepared to seek other stuff out, right? We have hundreds of labs on this campus doing some really great stuff.
Right.
It's okay to move on, right, if it needs that.
And you also don't need to do that. You don't need to do research in long term. Like, it can still help you to get that experience.
Right. That was my point now, right? Whether you like the actual specific piece or not, you're in a lab, you're working in a team, you're doing practical experience, and maybe for one semester you got to suck it up and do something you're really not excited about, but you gain skill no matter what. That was my point, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Michelle. Thank you.
So baboon shit, are we gonna close on that? We're gonna talk about
I don't know that I want to talk about that.
Gloss that over like ain't no
It was there were so many jokes though, I mean,
write themselves.
They really do.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to do some research.
You could check it out. It's published.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. I hope that students that are watching consider an undergrad research experience. Definitely feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions. And take care. We'll see you next week.
I want to just quickly wish everybody safety. COVID numbers are going up around the country. So on behalf of this panel, we just want to hope that you continue to make good decisions and you and your family are safe as we go into Thanksgiving. All right.
Absolutely. Same here. All right, y'all. Take good care of yourselves.